Park Taiho stood near the back wall of the Great Hall and watched the aliens move like water across the polished floor. The Valari were beautiful in a way that made humans feel clumsy and rough. They had silver skin that seemed to glow from inside. Their eyes looked like liquid stars, bright and deep at the same time. When they walked, they seemed to float. When they talked, their voices sounded like music. Taiho was not here to admire them. He was a security officer, nothing more. His job was simple. Watch the room. Look for trouble. Keep his mouth shut. The trade summit had brought together humans and Valari for the first time in years. Station Meridian floated in the space between two galaxies, a neutral place where neither side had power over the other. The humans wanted trade routes. The Valari wanted human labor and military support. Neither side trusted the other, but both sides needed something. Taiho adjusted his position against the wall and scanned the crowd again. He counted the exits. He noted the positions of the other security officers. He watched the servants carrying trays of strange food and drinks that glowed with soft colors. Then his eyes found her Princess Yuna of the Valari. Empire stood in the center of the room like a star that all the other lights revolved around. She was tall, even for a Valari. Her silver skin was smooth and perfect. Her hair fell in waves of white silk down her back. She wore a dress made of fabric that shifted colors when she moved, blue to purple to silver and back again. She was the daughter of the Empress herself, sent here as a symbol of peace. Her presence was supposed to show that the Valari took this summit seriously. Taiho thought it mostly showed that the Valari liked to remind everyone of their power and beauty. He looked away. She was not his concern. His concern was the room, the exits, the people who did not belong. The hours passed slowly. Speeches were made. Toasts were raised. The Valari smiled their cold smiles and said polite words that meant nothing. The human diplomat smiled back and pretended not to notice the insults hidden in the politeness. Taiho was tired. His feet hurt. He wanted to go back to his small room on the station and sleep for 100 years. Then he saw the man. He was human, dressed as a servant, carrying a tray like all the others. But something was wrong. His hands were shaking. His eyes were moving too fast, looking at everything and nothing. Sweat was running down his face, even though the room was cool. Taiho pushed away from the wall. His heart started to beat faster. He reached for his communication device to call for backup, but the man was already moving. The servant dropped his tray. The sound of breaking glass cut through the noise of the crowd. People turned to look. In that moment of confusion, the man pulled something from under his jacket. Taiho recognized it immediately. A bomb, small but powerful. Enough to kill everyone within 20 meters. The man screamed something about freedom and oppression. He screamed about humans being slaves to alien masters. He screamed about ending the corrupt alliance before it could begin. Then he pressed the button. Taiho did not think. There was no time to think. His body moved on its own, driven by instinct and training and something deeper that he could not name. Princess Yuna was 10 meters away. Her guards were far behind her. Her advisors were already diving to the floor. She stood frozen, her starlight eyes wide with shock, as the blast wave began to ripple toward her. Taiho ran. He had never moved so fast in his life. The world seemed to slow down around him. He could see the fire beginning to bloom like a terrible flower. He could see the shrapnel flying through the air like angry insects. He could see the princess still not moving, still not understanding what was about to happen to her. He hit her with his full weight, wrapping his arms around her as they fell. They crashed to the floor together, and Taiho rolled, putting his body between her and the explosion. The blast hit him like a giant fist. Pain exploded through his back. Something punched through his body once, twice, 3 times. He felt heat and cold at the same time. He felt wet warmth spreading across his skin. He knew in some distant part of his mind that he was bleeding, that he was dying, but the princess was under him, safe, protected by his flesh and bone. The noise was incredible. Screaming, crashing, the roar of fire. Alarms began to wail. Tai-Ho could hear people running, could feel the floor shaking with their footsteps. He tried to move, but his body would not obey. Everything felt heavy and far away. The pain was fading now, replaced by a cold numbness that crept through his limbs like ice water under him. Princess Yuna was screaming something in her own language. Her voice was high and frightened, nothing like the cold music he had heard before. She was pushing at him, trying to get out from under his weight, but he could not move to help her. Someone was pulling at him now. Hands grabbed his shoulders and rolled him onto his back. The ceiling swam above him, lights blurring together into a single white glow. A face appeared above him. Silver skin, starlight eyes. Princess Yuna looked down at him with an expression he could not read. Her mouth was moving, but he could not hear the words anymore. Everything was fading, sounds and lights and pain all mixing together into gray nothing. He wanted to tell her to run. He wanted to tell her that there might be more bombs. He wanted to tell her that she needed to get to safety, but his mouth would not move. His eyes would not stay open. The last thing he saw was her face. Beautiful and alien and full of something that might have been fear or wonder or both. The last thing he felt was her hand touching his face, cool and soft against his burning skin. Then darkness took him, and Park Tai-Ho knew nothing more. The explosion killed 37 people that day. Humans and Valari died together, their blood mixing on the polished floor of the Great Hall. The trade summit collapsed before it could truly begin. The terrorist was dead, killed by his own bomb. His message of hate delivered in fire and blood. But Princess Yuna lived, because a human security officer, a man she had never met, had chosen to die for her without a second thought. The Valari did not understand it. They pulled Tai-Ho's broken body from the wreckage and stared at him with their starlight eyes. They watched the human doctors work desperately to save his life. They listened to the other humans cry and pray, and beg their gods to let this man live. And they wondered what kind of creatures could produce such a being. What kind of society could create a man who would give his life for a stranger? What kind of madness or miracle lived in the hearts of these primitive, short-lived beings called humans? Princess Yuna stood apart from the others, her dress torn and stained with human blood. She watched the doctors work on the man who had saved her. She watched his chest rise and fall in weak, uncertain breaths. She watched his face, peaceful now in unconsciousness. And she felt something she had never felt before. She did not have a word for it in her language, but she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would not let this man die. She would take him to her world. She would give him the best healers in the Empire. She would do whatever it took to save him, because he had done the same for her, and because, for the first time in her long life, Princess Yuna had met someone who made her question everything she believed about the universe. Tai-Ho opened his eyes and saw light that should not exist. The ceiling above him glowed with colors that moved and changed like living things. Blue melted into green, green melted into gold, gold melted into soft purple. The patterns shifted and flowed like water, like clouds, like dreams made visible. He blinked. The light was still there. He was not dreaming. He tried to sit up, and pain hit him like a hammer. It was not sharp pain, not the screaming agony he expected. It was deep and dull, like someone had reached inside his body and squeezed everything hard. He gasped and fell back onto the soft surface beneath him. The bed, if it was a bed, felt like nothing he had ever touched before. It was soft in a way that seemed impossible, like lying on a cloud made of silk and warm air. It shaped itself around his body, supporting him perfectly, easing the pressure on his wounds. Where was he? What had happened? Memory came back in pieces. The summit. The bomb. The princess. Running. Pain. Darkness. He was alive. That was the first surprise. He turned his head slowly, carefully, and the second surprise hit him like a cold wave. He was not alone. Dozens of Valari surrounded his bed. They stood in circles, one ring behind another, all of them staring at him with their strange, bright eyes. They wore robes of shimmering fabric that caught the light from the ceiling and threw it back in sparkling patterns. Their silver faces showed no expression that he could read. Taiho felt his heart start to race. His training told him to assess the situation, to look for weapons, to find exits. But he could barely move. He could barely breathe. He was helpless, surrounded by aliens in a place he did not know. Then he saw her. Princess Yuna stood at the foot of his bed, separated from the others by a small space that seemed to mark her importance. She looked different now. On the station, she had been beautiful but soft, a symbol of peace and cooperation. Now she looked like something else entirely. She stood straight and tall, power radiating from her like heat from a fire. A crown of living crystal sat on her head, its facets catching the light and throwing tiny rainbows across the walls. This was not the frightened girl he had shielded from the blast. This was a princess of an empire that spanned 1,000 worlds. He tried to speak. His voice came out as a dry croak, rough and weak. He swallowed and tried again. Where am I? The Valari around him stirred at the sound of his voice. They whispered to each other in their musical language, words he could not understand. The whispers spread through the room like wind through leaves. Princess Yuna raised one hand, and the whispers stopped immediately. You are in the heart of the Valari Empire, she said. Her voice was steady, controlled, nothing like the screaming he remembered from the explosion. You are in the Royal Medical Center of the Imperial Palace. You have been sleeping for 12 cycles. Taiho tried to understand this. 12 cycles. He did not know how long a Valari cycle was. Days, weeks? It did not matter. What mattered was that he was alive, and he was very far from home. The bomb, he said. The summit. What happened? Yuna's expression flickered, just for a moment. Something like pain crossed her face before she controlled it. The attack was organized by separatists, she said. Humans who opposed the alliance with our empire. They believed that trade with the Valari would lead to human slavery. They decided that death was better than cooperation. She paused. Her starlight eyes met his. 37 beings died in the explosion. Humans and Valari both. The summit collapsed. The alliance negotiations have stopped. Taiho closed his eyes. 37 dead. Because of hate. Because of fear. Because some people would rather destroy than build. I am sorry, he whispered. He did not know why he was apologizing. He had not built the bomb. He had not pressed the button. But he was human, and humans had done this terrible thing. You have nothing to apologize for. Yuna's voice was sharp, cutting through his guilt like a knife. He opened his eyes and saw that she had moved closer. She stood beside his bed now, looking down at him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. You saved my life, she said. You threw yourself between me and the explosion. You took the damage that was meant for me. You nearly died. I was doing my job, Taiho said. No. The word echoed through the room. The watching Valari shifted and murmured. Your job was to guard the perimeter. Your job was to watch for threats and report them. Your job was not to sacrifice yourself for a Valari princess you had never spoken to. She was right. He knew she was right. But he did not know how to explain what he had done or why. I saw the bomb, he said slowly. I saw you. You were not moving. No one was going to reach you in time. So I ran. But why? Yuna leaned closer. Her face was only a foot from his now. He could see the tiny patterns in her silver skin, like frost on a window. He could see the light moving in her eyes like stars being born and dying. Why did you run toward death instead of away from it? Why did you choose to die for someone you did not know? Taiho thought about the question. He thought about his training, his duty, his oath to protect. He thought about his parents, who had taught him to help others. He thought about all the choices that had led him to that moment in the Great Hall. I do not know, he said finally. It was not a choice. There was no time to choose. I just moved. Yuna stared at him for a long moment. Then she straightened and stepped back. Our physicians have healed your wounds, she said. You will recover fully. The damage was severe, but our medical technology is advanced. You will walk again. You will live. Relief washed through Taiho like warm water. He had been afraid to ask, afraid to know how badly he was hurt. Thank you, he said. Do not thank me. Yuna's voice was strange now, tight and controlled. You created a debt when you saved my life. In Valari culture, such debts must be repaid. I brought you here because I owed you healing. I gave you our best physicians because I owed you life for life. Taiho did not understand. You do not owe me anything. I did what anyone would do. The room went completely silent. The Valari stopped breathing. Even the lights on the ceiling seemed to freeze in their endless dance. Yuna stared at him with an expression he could not read. No, she said softly. That is exactly the problem. What you did is not what anyone would do. It is not what anyone should do. It breaks every rule we know about how beings think and act. She turned to face the watching crowd. This human, she said, her voice carrying to every corner of the room, has done something that our philosophers say is impossible. He gave his life for a stranger without expecting anything in return. He acted against his own survival for no logical reason. He is an anomaly, a mystery, a question that demands an answer. She turned back to Taiho. The Empress wishes to meet you, she said. My grandmother, who has ruled for 500 years, wants to look upon the human who would die for nothing. Taiho felt cold despite the warmth of the strange bed. What does she want from me? Yuna smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it changed her entire face. For just a moment, she looked less like a princess and more like a person. That, she said, is what we are all trying to figure out. She turned and walked toward the door. The crowd parted before her like water before a ship. At the doorway, she paused and looked back. Rest now. Part Taiho of Earth. You will need your strength for what comes next. Then she was gone, and Taiho was alone with the watching Valari and the dancing lights, and the growing certainty that his life would never be the same again. The days passed slowly in the Imperial Medical Center. Taiho learned to walk again. His body healed faster than any human doctor would have believed possible. The Valari physicians used machines that hummed with strange energy and medicines that glowed with soft light. They pressed their silver hands against his wounds and somehow made the pain fade away. He did not understand their technology. He was not sure he wanted to understand it. He just wanted to go home, but no one would tell him when he could leave. On the 7th day after he woke up, a human woman came to see him. She was small and sharp, with black hair cut short and eyes that missed nothing. She wore the formal uniform of the Earth Diplomatic Corps, gray and blue with silver buttons. Lieutenant Park Taiho, she said, sitting down in the chair beside his bed. I am Ambassador Kang Mei. I have been assigned to help you navigate your current situation. Taiho sat up straighter. An ambassador. They had sent an ambassador to talk to him. That could not be good. What situation? He asked. I saved the princess. They healed me. Now I want to go home." Myray smiled, but it was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something you did not want to hear. "It is not that simple," she said. "You have created what the Valari call a life debt. In their culture, if someone saves your life, you owe them an equal debt. The only way to repay it is to save their life in return." Taiho frowned. "So the princess owes me a life debt?" "Yes, and because you nearly died, the debt is considered very large. The princess cannot repay it simply by healing you. She would need to risk her own life for yours, in equal measure to what you risked for her." "That is stupid," Taiho said. Myray laughed, a real laugh this time. "Yes, many human customs seem stupid to them too. But this is how they think. Everything is a transaction. Give and take. Debt and payment. They do not understand doing something for free." Taiho thought about this. "So what happens now?" "Now things get complicated." Myray leaned forward, lowering her voice even though they were alone. "The princess has taken you into her personal protection. She has declared that you will stay in the palace until the debt can be properly resolved. The Empress has agreed. They are keeping me prisoner? They are keeping you as a guest. A very honored guest with very little freedom." Myray shook her head. "But that is not the complicated part. The complicated part is what your actions mean to them." "I do not understand." Myray sighed. "Lieutenant, the Valari do not have the concept of sacrifice. Not the way we do. In their culture, you never give something without expecting something back. Even their acts of kindness are calculated. They help others because helping creates debts, and debts are power." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "What you did, jumping in front of that bomb without thinking, without expecting reward, it makes no sense to them. Their philosophers are arguing about it. Their religious leaders are writing papers about it. Some of them think you are touched by their gods. Some of them think you are insane." "I am not insane," Taiho said. "I know, but you are human, and humans do things that the Valari cannot explain. We sacrifice ourselves for strangers. We help people who cannot help us back. We love without reason and die for causes we believe in." Myray smiled sadly. "To them, this is either divine or mad. They have not decided which." Taiho was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, he could see a garden filled with plants that glowed and flowers that sang soft songs. The sky was purple here, with 3 moons visible even in daylight. Everything was beautiful and strange and very far from Earth. "What does the princess think?" he asked finally. Marie's expression changed. Something knowing entered her eyes. "The princess visits you every day when you're sleeping," she said. "She asks the physicians about your progress. She reads the reports on your condition. She has learned your name, your history, your family. She knows more about you than anyone else in this empire." Taiho felt his face grow warm. "Why? I do not know for certain, but I have a guess." Myray stood up, straightening her uniform. "You showed her something she had never seen before. You showed her that beings can act without calculation, without self-interest, without the endless game of debt and payment. You showed her that there is another way to live." She walked toward the door, then stopped. "Be careful, Lieutenant. The Valari are not evil, but they are different. They do not think like us. They do not feel like us. Whatever the princess wants from you, it will not be simple." After she left, Taiho lay in his bed and thought about what she had said. He thought about the princess with her starlight eyes and her crown of living crystal. He thought about the way she looked at him, like he was a puzzle she needed to solve. He thought about home. His small apartment in Seoul, his mother's cooking, the feel of rain on his face and the sound of Korean on every corner. He missed it all with an ache that sat heavy in his chest. But part of him, a small and traitorous part, was curious about this strange world. Curious about the silver-skinned aliens who could not understand kindness. Curious about the princess who watched him sleep and asked about his family. Curious about what would happen next. The next day, the princess came to see him in person. She did not bring her guards or her advisors. She came alone, dressed in simple clothes that made her look younger and softer. She sat in the chair where Mayray had sat and looked at him with those impossible eyes. "You are healing well," she said. "Your physicians are very skilled." "Yes." She was quiet for a moment. "I wanted to thank you." Taiho shook his head. "Ambassador," Kang explained the life debt. "I do not want you to feel obligated. This is not about obligation." Yuna's voice was firm. "This is about what I feel. What I choose to feel." She looked down at her hands folded in her lap. "I have been a princess since the day I was born," she said quietly. "I have been protected and guarded and kept safe from everything. People bow to me. People serve me. People would die for me if commanded. But no one has ever chosen to die for me. No one has ever looked at me and decided, without order or obligation, that my life was worth their own." She looked up at him. "Until you." Taiho did not know what to say. The moment stretched between them, heavy with meaning he could not quite grasp. "I did not think about it," he said finally. "There was no time to think. I just moved. Yes, that is what makes it remarkable." Yuna leaned forward. "In my world, every action is calculated. Every choice is weighed against its benefits. We do not act without thinking. We cannot act without thinking. But you did. You threw away your life on instinct, on pure reaction, and that instinct was to save a stranger." She reached out and touched his hand. Her fingers were cool and smooth. "What does it feel like?" she asked. "To be capable of such a thing?" Taiho thought about the question. He thought about all the times he had acted without thinking, all the small kindnesses and reflexive helps that made up a human life. "It feels normal," he said. "It feels like being human." Yuna smiled, and for the first time, it reached her eyes. "Then perhaps," she said, "I would like to learn what it means to be human." And Taiho realized, with a mix of fear and wonder, that his time in this alien court had only just begun. The day Taiho was called to meet the Empress, the entire palace held its breath. Servants dressed him in clothes made of fabric that felt like water against his skin. They combed his hair and cleaned his face and made sure every part of him was perfect. They spoke to each other in quick Velari words, their voices tight with nervousness. Taiho did not understand why everyone was so afraid. Yes, the Empress was powerful. Yes, she had ruled for 500 years. But she was just a person, an alien person, and he had faced worse things than difficult conversations. Then he entered the throne room, and he understood. The space was impossible. The ceiling rose so high that it disappeared in the mist and shadow. Columns of living crystal grew from the floor, each one taller than any building on Earth, each one filled with light that pulsed like a heartbeat. The air smelled like flowers and electricity, and something old and deep that made his bones hum. Hundreds of Velari lined the path from the door to the throne. They stood in perfect rows, their silver faces turned toward him, their starlight eyes watching his every step. They wore robes of every color, shimmering and shifting like oil on water. They did not move. They did not speak. They barely seemed to breathe, and at the far end of the room, on a throne that seemed grown from a single massive gemstone, sat the Empress. She was ancient. Taiho could see it in the darkness of her silver skin, turned almost to pewter with age. He could see it in the depth of her eyes, which held 500 years of memories and decisions and power. He could see it in the way she sat, perfectly still, perfectly controlled. like a statue that had been watching the universe since before humans learned to walk. Ambassador Kang had taught him the proper way to approach. Taiho walked forward, keeping his eyes down, counting his steps. At the proper distance, he stopped and bowed low. The position hurt his still healing body, but he held it without complaint. Silence stretched across the room like a living thing. "Rise, human." The voice was not loud, but it filled the entire space. It resonated in the crystal columns and echoed off the distant walls. It vibrated in Taiho's chest like the deep note of a giant bell. He straightened and looked at the Empress for the first time. Her eyes met his, and he felt something shift inside him. Those eyes were not just old. They were ancient beyond human understanding. They had watched empires rise and fall. They had seen stars born and die. They held knowledge and power that Taiho could not even imagine. "So," the Empress said, "this is the human who saved my granddaughter." "Yes, Your Radiance." His voice sounded small in this vast space. "I have read the reports. I have watched the recordings from the security cameras. I have spoken with witnesses." The Empress leaned forward slightly. "I have seen what you did, human, but I do not understand it. I am sorry, Your Radiance. I do not understand it either." Something flickered in those ancient eyes. Surprise, perhaps, or interest. "You do not know why you did it." "I know what I did," Taiho said carefully. "I saw the princess in danger. I ran. I put myself between her and the explosion. But if you ask me why, if you ask me what calculation I made in that moment, I cannot tell you. There was no calculation. There was only action." The Empress was quiet for a long time. The watching Valari shifted nervously. No one had ever made the Empress wait for so long. "I have studied your kind since you first crawled out of your solar system," she said finally. "I have watched you spread across the stars like weeds, multiplying and adapting and somehow surviving in places where you should not survive. I found you primitive, loud, short-lived, unremarkable." She stood from her throne. The entire room seemed to gasp. "But this act of yours has made me question my judgment. You gained nothing from what you did. You expected nothing. You nearly died for a being you had never spoken to. This is not how rational creatures behave." "With respect, Your Radiance," Taiho said, "that is not entirely true." The room went completely silent. No one interrupted the Empress. No one contradicted her. No one dared. But Taiho had faced death. He had felt shrapnel tear through his body. He had woken up in an alien palace surrounded by beings who thought he was mad or divine. He had nothing left to fear from words. "I did gain something," he continued, his voice steady. "I gained the knowledge that I acted according to my own values. I gained the certainty that when it mattered most, I did not freeze. I did not run away. I did not let fear control me." He paused, gathering his thoughts. "Where I come from, we believe that character is what you do when no one is watching. It is easy to be brave when there is reward. It is easy to be kind when there is payment. But true character shows itself in the moments when there is nothing to gain and everything to lose." He met the Empress's ancient eyes. "I did not save your granddaughter because I am special. I saved her because that is who I am. That is who humans try to be, even if we fail sometimes. We try to be the kind of beings who run toward danger instead of away from it. We try to be the kind of beings who help strangers even when it costs us everything." The Empress stared at him for a long moment. Then, slowly, her face changed. It was not quite a smile, but it was something close. Something like respect. "Remarkable," she said. "Truly remarkable." She descended from her throne, walking toward him with steps that made no sound. The court around them dropped to their knees, pressing their foreheads to the floor. Only Taiho remained standing, uncertain of what to do. The Empress stopped in front of him, so close he could see the tiny patterns in her ancient skin, like cracks in old silver. "You have created a problem for me, human," she said quietly. "My granddaughter carries a life debt that she cannot easily repay. The court whispers about your presence here. Some say you should be sent home immediately. Others say you should be studied like a strange animal. A few suggest you should be killed to prevent your disturbing ideas from spreading." Taiho kept his face calm, but his heart was racing. "What do you believe should happen, Your Radiance?" The Empress tilted her head, studying him like he was a puzzle. "I believe," she said slowly, "that you represent an opportunity. Your people and mine have never truly understood each other. We trade goods and services, but we do not trade ideas. We do not share beliefs. We look at each other across a gap of misunderstanding and make assumptions based on ignorance." She turned and walked back toward her throne, speaking as she went. "You have shown me something I did not expect. You have shown me that humans can surprise us, that your species has depths we have not explored, that perhaps, in our arrogance, we have underestimated you." She sat down on her throne and looked at him with those ancient eyes. "Therefore, Lieutenant Park Taiho of Earth, I invoke the ancient right of binding. You will remain in this court as a protected guest. You will be given quarters and servants and anything you need. You will learn our ways, and we will learn yours. And when the time comes, you will help forge something new between our peoples." Taiho felt the weight of her words settle on his shoulders. "Your Radiance," he said carefully, "I have duties on Earth, a posting, a life. Your government has been contacted. They have agreed to your new assignment." The Empress smiled, and it was not entirely kind. They were remarkably eager, in fact. It seems they understand the value of having a human in the heart of our empire. Taiho understood what she was not saying. He had become a political piece on a board he could not see. Earth wanted him here because he could gather information, make connections, influence the Valari. The Empress wanted him here because he was a curiosity, a symbol, a way to learn about humanity's strange ways. Neither side had asked what he wanted, but then, no one ever asked the pieces how they felt about the game. "I am honored, Your Radiance," he said, because there was nothing else to say. "You should be." The Empress waved one hand. "The audience is ended. My granddaughter will show you to your new quarters." Taiho bowed again and turned to leave. Princess Yuna waited at the edge of the crowd, her face unreadable. She fell into step beside him as they walked out of the great throne room. Neither of them spoke until they were alone in a quiet corridor. "That went better than expected," Yuna said. Ho looked at her. "You knew what she was going to say." "I knew what I hoped she would say." Yuna smiled slightly. "My grandmother is wise, but she is also old. She has not been surprised in a very long time." "You surprised her. That is valuable. I am glad my confusion has political value." Yuna laughed, a sound like silver bells. "Welcome to the court, Park Taiho. Nothing here is ever just one thing." And she led him deeper into the palace, toward a future he could not predict and a destiny he had never imagined. 3 months passed in the Valari Imperial Palace. Taiho learned to navigate a world that made no sense to him. He learned the complicated rules of court behavior, when to speak and when to stay silent, when to bow and how low, when to meet eyes and when to look away. He learned the Valari language, its musical tones and hidden meanings. He learned the history of an empire that had existed when humans were still living in caves. He also learned that he was being watched. Every conversation was reported. Every action was analyzed. The Valari did not trust him, not really. He was a curiosity, a puzzle, a potential threat. They smiled at him and spoke polite words, but their starlight eyes never warmed except for Princess Yuna. She came to see him often, more often than protocol allowed. They walked together in the crystal gardens, where plants from 100 worlds grew in impossible beauty. They talked about everything and nothing, about their homes and their families and their dreams for the future. At first, she asked questions. Endless questions about humanity, about Earth, about the way humans thought and felt. She wanted to understand why Taiho had done what he did. She wanted to understand how a being could act without calculation, without expecting reward. But as the weeks passed, the questions changed. She stopped asking about humanity and started asking about him, about his childhood in Korea, about his parents, who had died when he was young, about the grandmother who had raised him and taught him the values that had led him to jump in front of a bomb for a stranger. And Taiho found himself asking questions in return, about her life in the palace, trapped by duty and expectation, about the pressure of being the Empress's granddaughter, heir to 1,000 worlds, about what she truly wanted underneath all the politics and power. He learned that she was lonely, that she had been lonely all her life, surrounded by beings who wanted things from her but never wanted to know her. He learned that she had never had a real friend, never had someone who spoke to her like a person instead of a princess. He learned that she laughed, like silver bells when something genuinely surprised her. He learned that she had a secret love for human music, which she found raw and emotional in ways Valari music never was. He learned that she liked to watch the stars at night and wonder if there were other beings out there, more different beings, more strange ways of thinking. And she learned about him, about his fears and hopes, his doubts and certainties, about the way humans loved, fierce and irrational and completely beyond control, about the way humans grieved, with tears and ceremony and the slow healing work of memory. 3 months of walking and talking and learning each other. 3 months of something growing between them, something neither of them had words for, on a night when 3 moons hung full in the purple sky. They walked together in the garden of singing flowers. The blooms made soft music as they passed, responding to their footsteps and their breath, and something else that Taiho could not identify. "The court is worried about you," Yuna said. Her voice was casual, but Taiho heard the tension underneath. "They are always worried about me. This is different." She stopped walking and turned to face him. The moonlight caught her silver skin and made it glow. "They are worried about us, about how much time we spend together, about what it means." Taiho felt his heart beat faster. "What does it mean?" Yuna was quiet for a long moment. The flowers sang their soft songs around them. Somewhere in the distance, a night bird called with a voice like crystal chimes. "The court believes I am fascinated with you because you saved my life," she said finally. "Because of the life debt, they think my interest is obligation, payment for what I owe. Is it?" "No." The word was soft but certain. "That is not the whole truth." She looked up at the moons, then back at him. In her starlight eyes, Taiho saw something he had never seen before, something vulnerable and fierce at the same time. "You changed me, Park Taiho. The moment you threw yourself between me and that explosion, you broke something inside me. Everything I believed about the universe, about how beings work, about what is possible. You broke it all, and I cannot put it back together." She took a step closer to him. They were very close now, close enough that he could see the tiny movements of light in her eyes. "I have spent my whole life learning that beings are selfish, that every action is a transaction, that kindness is just manipulation wearing a pleasant face. And then you came, and you proved all of it wrong. You showed me that there are beings who can love without reason, who can give without expecting return, who can be good simply because good is what they choose to be." Taiho felt something tighten in his chest. "I am not that special. Any human would have done the same. Maybe." Yuna smiled slightly. "But you are the one who did it. You are the one who is here. You are the one I cannot stop thinking about." She reached out and touched his hand. In Valari culture, Taiho knew this was an intimate gesture. More intimate than a kiss in human terms. More meaningful than words could express. He should pull away. He knew that. She was an alien princess. He was a human security officer caught up in politics he did not understand. Their worlds were different. Their peoples were different. Everything about this was impossible and dangerous and wrong, but her hand was cool and soft against his. And her eyes were full of something that looked very much like hope. "I do not know where this path leads," she said quietly. "My grandmother will not approve. The court will be scandalized. My people will say I have been corrupted by human emotions. Your people will say you have been seduced by alien power. They will say worse than that," Taiho agreed. Yes, Yuna smiled, and it was the realest smile he had ever seen on her face. "But I find that I do not care. For the first time in my life, I do not care what the court thinks, or what my grandmother wants, or what is proper and expected. I only care about this moment, this garden, this conversation." She moved closer still. Her face was inches from his now. "I only care about you." Taiho looked at her. This alien princess who had started as a duty and become something else entirely. This being from another world who made him feel more understood than anyone he had ever known. "My grandmother taught me something," he said softly. "She said that some things are worth more than survival. Some things are worth believing in, even when the whole universe tells you it is impossible. And what do you believe in?" Taiho raised his hand and touched her face. Her silver skin was cool beneath his fingers, smooth as water, beautiful beyond words. "I believe in this," he said. "Whatever this is. Whatever it becomes." Princess Yuna smiled, and there were tears in her starlight eyes. Tears of joy or fear or both. It did not matter. What mattered was the truth of this moment. Two beings from different worlds choosing each other against all logic and expectation. "Then we walk this path together," she said. "Behind them, hidden in the shadows of the singing flowers." A court spy watched and listened and prepared to report what he had seen. The scandal would break by morning. The consequences would be severe. But in that moment, none of it mattered. In that moment, there was only a human man and a Valari princess, standing in a garden of impossible beauty, choosing love over fear and hope over calculation. And somewhere in the vast distance of space, on a small blue planet called Earth, humanity's story with the Valari had changed forever. Because one man had jumped in front of a bomb without thinking. Because one princess had opened her heart to a stranger. Because some things, as Taiho's grandmother had known, were worth more than survival. Some things were worth believing in. The story of Park Taiho and Princess Yuna was only beginning. There would be challenges ahead. Political battles. Cultural clashes. Enemies who wanted to tear them apart, and allies who would help them stand together. But as they stood in that garden under 3 full moons, their hands intertwined, their eyes meeting across the gap between worlds, they both knew one thing with perfect certainty. Whatever came next, they would face it together. And that was enough. That was everything.